So I think that's a big challenge, because those are conversations and issues that are really beyond your direct involvement, my direct involvement. You know, it really involves them having to take the initiative and make sure that gets resolved and reconciled. But that is one piece that we feel is still really missing. And that's where a lot of the gap ends up persisting, is employers not closing the loop and being able to do that. So again, I just ask you to be mindful in reminding anybody who comes back to you and says, I'm not getting credit for it. You know, have they done those steps? Have they checked with their employer? Did they actually click submit, or did they press save for later? Because they have the option to save it if it's not complete. But once they submit, it should go to the employer. And they can resubmit. So if something didn't reach the employer, they can click submit again and it gets reset. They can update that information. And if they've lost a password, I'm really good at that. It's very easy to reset and you don't even need to actually go to the help desk for that. You can reset it by going straight to the site and asking to do a reset. But again, any technical issues, contact the help desk. And I'll stop there. I think that's where we see a lot of the hangups right now, as far as people who should have credit that don't. That's been the biggest observation thus far. Brian, I'm going to ask, and there's a few of us enough. If you don't mind, you can either type it or you can just unmute yourself. Can you explain more what you mean by what happens in case of illness?
Well, in 2015, I completed the program in June, went back to work in August for in-service and things like that. And turns out that I had West Nile. So I was pretty much bedridden for like 19 months there. And then when I did finally get into teaching again, it did not go well at all. And as of right now, I still feel a lot of effects from it. You know, like I'm perpetually tired and fatigued, and my memory is going. So I don't know how this is gonna, you know, affect me in the long run.
So I will say two things about that without going into any more specifics on your case, and I'm happy to have you contact me directly and we can have a conversation offline. Here's what I can tell folks in general. When it comes to a severe disability that somehow prevents the individual from working anymore at all, then, you know, presumably that person is going to be seeking permanent disability status. And if that's the case, that is a case that they can take when they've been put in debt collection or debt referral, and they can provide documentation requesting to have that debt charged off, if you will. But that is something that's done many steps beyond us, meaning it's done with the Department of Treasury, and that's not even anything I ever get directly involved with. That is a request that the individual is making to the federal government via Treasury, who is the debt collector in this case. So Brian, we can take that offline if you want. I'll throw my email address and my phone in the chat box if you want to set up a time for us to talk about it separately. But in general, that's been my understanding. When cases have been charged off, it's where there's a permanent disability status, meaning that person's not going to be able to work, really, period. That's the only time I've seen a permanent charge off outside of death, to be quite frank. So that's otherwise individuals are expected to either fulfill service payback or to complete cash payback status. And by cash payback, in layperson terms, it's you've worked out a payment plan with the Department of Treasury's collection arm. right? So to be able to make those payments in whatever manner you've set up with them, agreement you've set up with them. But it's much like any kind of federal debt, you know, whether it would be owing taxes or owing on another loan, that's the type of payment plan and process that gets worked out. And that is not something that the department, that our agency handles at all. So I just want to be really clear about that, because there should be no assumption that I know anything that's going on about the nature of somebody's debt collection once we refer it. We typically do not know, unfortunately. So it's really hard to be able to assist outside of telling people, please be in touch with whoever's contacting you from Treasury, because we can't do much about that. So I hope that's a little helpful, at least in giving you guys in general some background on that.
Yeah, I would like to speak with you further on this. So if I can get your contact information, that would be awesome.
Yep, I've got my email in the chat box right there for you, okay? So Bonnie, good question. Again, if the employer's not verifying, I mean, there are a couple of things, right? We don't know why. So outside of, did they get the email? You know, that's where the participant has to do due diligence. It's up to them to go to the employer and say, hey, did you get this email? You know, did you see that, you know, I've got to fulfill this service payback? You know, they've really got to engage their employer, and it's on them to have to do that individually. Now, I've had some conversations with some of our project directors, some of you who might be here now, where you have a lot of people, for example, that might be funneled into, you know, you guys have a nice pipeline where you know it's going into one school or one district. If you find, looking at your DCS, at your profiles of your students, that you see like 5 or 6 that say fulfillment not in progress, but you know they're teaching, those 5 or 6 are teaching there. I know we've been working with a number of folks, but if you haven't heard from us and you see that and you want to make sure they get the credit, please feel free to reach out to me, because one thing that we have been trying to do where we have a high volume like that is try to see if we can't triangulate and communicate with you and the employer and us, and have one phone call so we can sort of chip away at, you know, those multiple individuals, and it, you know, it makes it a lot more efficient of a process, right, for both you, the employer. Here's the one hang up in that. The hitch first is that before we can do that, we have to make sure that what the participant entered is correct, and that the participant has entered anything. So before I'm willing to have those conversations with the employer, I'm asking you, the grant, you know, project directors, to make sure that your people have actually entered the data they should be entering. And if they haven't, that's the first step. So nobody can get credit for something they haven't asked for credit for. And once that's in, then it's being able to do the due diligence. And that's where we can work with you, where, you know, maybe the employer never got it again, or they just didn't respond, which is possible as well. Nancy, great question. Is the participant CC'd in the same email? No, they're not. They're not. But what they should know, and you guys should know, is the second that they enter the data, right? So they're entering where they are, you know, where they are, all of the information, what period of credit they're requesting. Once they click submit at the end of that section in the system, submit automatically generates that email to the employer. So literally the second they do that, they could in 5 minutes call up the employer and say, did you get that email? I just should have just gotten sent, you know? So, or, you know, the next day, however they want to communicate, but it's immediate. So there's.
That sounds like what they should do. It really does sound like what they should do. I have seen some of, this is maybe a few years ago, but I've seen some of the letters that go to the employers, and they're a little nondescript. And I might even delete mine. I'm just saying, thinking it's because I work at a university that's trying to keep everything from our emails. And so that's one thing that potentially could happen, I feel.
So Nancy, you're pointing out a shortcoming of ours that we completely recognize. It's
Mhm.
hard for us to customize that notification,
Yeah,
the volume, right? And it's automatic. And so it has to stay generic, but it's why we're trying to convey to you guys, to convey to the participants,
yeah,
let them know this is coming. It's
Yeah.
coming from OASE payback, it's that same email that we send out to you guys. That's the help desk email, right?
Yeah.
Please know that that's coming from there. That's what I need you to click on and verify. So we also have, and we reminded folks, and I'll see if I can't, am I able to share my screen here,
Yes, you can.
folks? I'm gonna pull up really quick. I'm just gonna go into the PDP DCS. Ask you guys to bear with me for a second here. All right, everybody see that with me? So
Yes.
earlier today on the event, Karen pointed everybody to training and resources, which is that second item on the upper left-hand navigation bar. And that training and resources will bring you to job aids, quick screenshots of exactly what people see. Now, there's an employer section. So employers click here. If they click here, they see what's coming and they see what to fill out. That's a PDF. The participant could send this PDF and say, hey, this is coming. Can you fill it out? This is the, here are the directions or the guide about how to complete it. Does that make sense for folks? And again, this is something you guys can have handy as well, of course, if you got contacted, but you can share this easily with them. You don't need to be logged into the DCS in order to access. All this is on the homepage, right? So once you're at pdp.ed.gov, that second item, training and resources, and these are, everything you wanted to know and more about, the interface for every user, the participant, the employer, the grantee. Any questions on that? Okay. But yeah, Nancy, that is something that we certainly are frustrated by ourselves. There's really not an easy answer to it, just simply because of the volume, right? That has to be maintained. And if some of you might be familiar with the fact that this system is actually a system that serves 3 different programs. So it serves us, OIE. There's a special interface for the Office of Special Education Programs because they have a comparable service payback program, as well as Rehabilitation Services Administration, RSA. So we have sister programs that have very parallel service payback obligation grants. And they use the same system and they have probably thousands more than we do. But yeah, this is a shortcoming we all share in because there's not really an easy answer, right? Part of this is the nature of the way, frankly, the program was designed, meaning in statute. We can't be working directly with the employers, yada, yada. And it's, well, you guys are that sort of first line of, you're on the front lines. It's only for the time that you're a grantee, right? And after that, it kind of gets shifted to us. And so that handoff also is a challenge because we haven't been, right, interacting with the grantees, with the participants rather, before then. Christine, sorry, you had a question. Good to see you.
Yeah, hi, hi Angela, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good to see you too. So I just want to make sure we went into that menu item and we ourselves downloaded that PDF form, and we're still not getting, I'm still lacking this one, well, lacking one in particular place where the folks have not been in school, this year because of coronavirus. But if we were to send that form to the employer and say, look, we're trying to make this connection, would that be okay for us to do as grantees?
You can do that. Again, part of it is, they might come to you and say, I've never heard of this. I never saw that. And you can't do anything to fix that because it's up to the participant to have
Right.
data, right? So as long as you're confident that the participant has done so, and again, I'll say, let's say I'm your participant, Christine, and you're doing that on my behalf, and you call me up and you say, hey, I just sent that to your employer. Can you resend your request? I just have to go back in and click submit again with all my data. And, and then they should get that email. But again, it is a back and forth of with the employer, it's an exchange of, did you get the email? I can tell you of all the times that we've worked on this, after they add to safe senders to make sure doesn't go to their spam box, or they, check your spam, check your junk mail, for OESC payback obligations at ed.gov, that same email address. If they still aren't, I've only had one instance where we've had to manually work around that. It just takes that, making sure that they know it's coming. And once they have it, knowing how to complete it. And so that PDF I shared is just more of the how to complete it. But the participants should be proactive in, hey, this is coming. And then the participants, after they engage with the employer, should be going back into the system periodically to make sure they got the credit. So there was a screenshot we shared earlier of, if they haven't, it'll say pending, it'll say approved if that's exactly what the employer has done. But it'll say pending if it's been sent, but nothing's been done.
Okay. And then I have one more question, if I could.
Sure.
I have one participant who graduated with her educational administration degree. So technically she should be in an administrative position, right? After receiving her degree. But this individual has been working in schools, but not necessarily in a bona fide administrative position. And, I've contacted her previously, to ask, well, because she has been one that has been reluctant to verify or get into the PDP to verify that she is employed. She's been employed since graduating, but has not been in a bona fide admin position. She has been working in Native American schools, but more in terms of a program coordinator kind of position. So I don't know how. Should I just go ahead and tell her to enter that information on the PDP?
So let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to talk about that, Christine. Thank you for doing that. Let's go to the next slide. Can I ask you to go one more? Great. So at the end of the day, you've trained them to take on a specific role. The expectation in a qualifying job means that they are taking on that role in order to be able to do complete service payback. So participants qualify for work related payback if the work they are performing is in their field of study under the PDP and benefits Indian students. So yes, well, working in a school with, I'm just going to say high proportion of Native students, or a BIE school, whatever it is, that's great, but it's not enough. They have to be completing or carrying out their position, in a role, in a job that requires the degree that they earned. So really the question I'd be coming back with is, Christine, I'd say, go ahead and have them fill it out. But my first question is going to be, they have to fill out all those things about what the nature of the work, right? When they're completing and asking for credit. The real question is, does their job description require the degree that they got? Because if it doesn't, that's not a qualifying job. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Whatever, I'm less concerned about the actual title than I am about, you should be going into a job that requires that degree, right? So
Mhm.
that's another way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
And they can do that. And the reality is, if they're not in that position, they should be asking to complete cash payback.
Mm. Okay.
Take a pause here and say that over this last year, especially because of COVID, we paused referrals, right? So we paused debt referral for the most part, except for people who said, hey, I want to pay that back now. So let me go ahead and pay back in cash. We referred those. So when I say debt referral, it's not a bad thing all the time, right? Some people want to do cash payback. So we've gone ahead and sent those along to the Department of Treasury so that they can work out a cash payment plan, right? So all that business of how they pay it back, that is all done with the US Department of Treasury. Once I complete something called a debt referral, it's out of the agency. It is out of the Department of Education's hand. It goes to Treasury, and Treasury will behave like any other debt collector. They're going to call them 13 times. They're going to send an email, call me. They should not ever, ever, ever ignore that because that's bad. Why is that bad? That adds penalties, that adds fees, and it makes what could have been a $5,000 debt $25,000. I mean, I'm just going to call it what it is. It's bad. So don't ignore it. And if you say nothing else to the folks who maybe didn't finish or maybe finished but aren't fulfilling, tell them, please don't ignore that. And those are really for your older participants, meaning before FY16. So I'm kind of sharing this out for those of you that have, older grants. But for those of you with FY16, 17, 18, you should know that we have, for the most part, put those on pause. That is likely going to end come the fall, which is why we've been doing all this work of trying to remind people of what their responsibilities are. I want to be really clear about what your responsibilities are. Your responsibilities as project directors are to do the due diligence of being sure that you've been clear in communicating your participants, what their requirements, what their obligations are. So once you exit them from the system because they've graduated, hopefully, or if they exited without completion, that you've conveyed to them exactly what they need to do, what those next steps are. So all these things that we share with you guys, it's really just turning it around and sharing it with them, right? Of you guys, if you're already placed, go in and do that. So first and foremost is, and I'm going to really focus on the FY18 cohort, you guys kind of straddled, right? You were technically under that new statutory language of high proportion of Native students. And I have people coming back to me, well, what does that mean now that you guys have final regulations in place? My answer is going to be, go back to your original application because you got that application approved in FY18. What did you say about where they would go and where you would place them? Because we approved that. So it's hard for me to be universal in what the requirement is for the FY18 applicants because you guys preceded final regulations. But what we did say in the FAQs for that competition was whatever you say and we approve in that application is what your participants should be doing. So if you don't remember that, go back and look. Go back and look at what you said that they would do. Because that's critical. That's critical about where you said you would place them. You got letters of support for places that did qualify. So they should have gone there. And if they didn't go there, were you clear with your participants that if you don't go there, you run the risk of not qualifying for service payback? And so are you, are you, here you go, participant, I'm going to need to pay you back, or you're going to have to pay back in cash if you don't go find another qualifying place. It doesn't have to be the letter, the school that was the source of one of your letters of support, but it does need to be comparable, right, of qualifying. So again, back to, another BIE school, or, another school that serves, again, a high proportion. We now have that defined, in statute. We now have it defined in our program regulations. We went through that whole process over this last year. You have a list from the last competition that gives you a whole laundry list of all the qualifying schools. I think I see Cheryl just joined us, and I want to make sure, Cheryl, that I answer your question. This is actually perfect timing. I believe, and Cheryl, correct me if I'm wrong, you had asked the question about what if the student goes to another state. In fact, we have many of your participants that end up in another state to teach. Again, the question is less about where they're teaching. It's more about, do they have a license or certification to teach in that state? That's number one. If they do, that's great. That's fine. That's a potential qualifier. And then two, are they teaching in a qualifying employment, meaning in an LEA that serves a high proportion of Native students? I'll go back to that laundry list that we issued in the FY21 competition, right, of state by state. And we did the common states, right, meaning states where most of our grantees come from, and we know most. And if you didn't see a state on there and they've moved to that state, you can let us know and I can help you identify what states are qualifying. But for the most part, you should be able to pull and say, hey, here's a list. Here's a list of LEAs that we know that, the Department of Education will allow for you to work in and qualify for service payback. I will make sure, in fact, Sarah, if I'm going to ask you to prompt me to make sure we reissue that list to our project directors and that we get it posted, because I think we took it down from the competition page. But I want to make sure that list stays up for the purposes of qualifying employment information. So thank you, Cheryl, for that question, because it's frankly not uncommon for us to see our participants go to other states. The state licensure or the geographic location is not so important as it is that if they got a training benefit to become a math teacher, a high school math teacher, that they're going to that other state and becoming a high school math teacher, not a third grade physical education teacher, right? So that's really the key, is the substantive portion of what, as opposed to where. Okay. Any other questions on this page before I go? And again, it's a one-to-one, right? They're only required for payback for the time that they were actually getting the benefit, right? So in the classroom. Next slide. This is something that I know sometimes folks get confused about too. So it's for the actual time they work. So even if they get paid over 12 months, but it's a 9-month it's 9 months of teaching, then it's 9 months of payback, not 12 months, just to be clear. It's service, right? Actual service versus payment. Next slide. Before I jump into the cash payback, another reminder, and I mentioned this today to participants, which I think inevitably confuses some, but it's a reminder that we also know that there's sometimes not a fine line in terms of jobs and positions, meaning that many people can be working in small, rural, remote schools that require people to have multiple roles. The key is not, I help the principal out with this. Do I get credit for doing some administrative work? No, the key is it in the job description, right? Did I have in the job description both of these roles? And so if you were if you earned an administrator degree with a training benefit, then the question is, and you got hired, but you're also teaching, then that administrator training participant should be able to at least get partial credit for the time for the FTE portion for which they serve as the administrator, right? So if it's 0.75 and they teach 0.25, then they're getting 0.75 credit. So they should still be trying to submit to get that credit, that partial credit. So partial credit is important and that matters. I want to make sure people are aware of that. We know about the cash payback. I'm not going to really say much more about that. Let's go to the next slide. One other reminder yet again, which I did not get to during today's event, and I wish I had, was reminding people that were in the FY20 cohort that had graduated during the time frame you see here on the slide, that they have those 24 months, right? They have longer as part of COVID flexibility. And similarly, anybody who was in work payback in FY20 had more time to submit their employment. But this is just a reminder that for those folks that are on the front end of that time period, that October 1, 2019 period, that they're nearing the end of that flexibility. So it comes back to, you can expect that you'll start hearing, and as we do our outreach to anybody that might be considered for cash payback, we will be in touch. We will be copying you on any electronic, communication and or written communication that comes out of OIE. We're definitely going to make sure that you're aware of it, because it's really paid for us to have some calls with some of you who have a lot of people in this predicament, where we have found that that they're teaching, there's something falling through the cracks and they're not getting the credit for it. And we do not want to mistakenly refer people who should not be referred. Next slide, please. So this is another one that I want to make sure, if you get the question from your participants, that we're clear about. Deferrals. What's really important to understand is an education deferral is fine under a couple of important conditions. One is that they're going to enter as a full-time student, so they can't possibly work. And two, they're going immediately from, whatever the training program was, teacher or administrator, into this other full-time education program, meaning they didn't complete the training that you had for them before, take 2 years off, and are now going back and asking for that deferral. That's a no-no. It's only okay if they're going immediately from the training program into another full-time education program. So I want to make sure people are clear about that. I've had people try to dispute some of those where they're like, well, and my question is, well, what were you doing not paying back the 2 years prior in between? So that's where people kind of get caught. Patricia, you had a question.
Hi, Angela.
Hi.
I had a question about, so many of our students happen to work and go to school full time. Would it be allowed if they, sometimes they work 10 hours, sometimes they might work 30, but they still go to work full time? Would that be allowed?
Probably, well, it depends, right? Because are they working I'm not sure how they could be working in a position that requires the degree that they're in the middle of earning.
Oh, no. So this would be a case. So this is an actual case of a student who is withdrawing from the program. So he's not going to pursue teaching, but he decided he's going to go into, let's just say, linguistics full time, but he still has to work. Could he qualify for the deferral and still work? He will be a full-time student in just a different program. Is he allowed to work anywhere between 10 and 20 hours?
He'd have to be in payback because he didn't complete the program. It's only if he completed the program that he could request the deferral.
Oh, only if, oh, so you can't be a full-time student and request a deferral?
Well, meaning he hasn't completed the training program, right? The teacher training program.
Right, he decided
Him without
that,
completion, then he's in cash payback.
oh, okay. We thought maybe there was an exception that if he was still in school, he could get a deferral. No, okay,
No,
all right, thank you.
sorry. Yeah, okay. Did I see another question here?
Yes, I had a question in regards to like a participant with their payback obligations for a neighboring school that is located just, in close proximity to the tribal college in which the student graduated. And those students, they're about 20 to 25% Native American Indian students there for their population. I don't see that on the list that you just sent out. So I was just kind of wondering if they would still be eligible if like a fourth of their students within their class was Native. Yeah.
So all public schools, save for BIE schools, that which we didn't list because that's kind of obvious, right? Sort of redundant, but clearly all BIE schools count. If it's not on there, my question would be, is it a private school? Because if it's a private school, it does not count. It has to be a public school. So if it's parochial, if it's a religious school, not non-public schools would not count as qualifying employment.
Okay, it is a public school. I just didn't see it on the list, so.
So if you don't, you can send me the name of the school and we can look, or if you have an NCES number, because all of these were pulled from the US, from the National Center for Education Statistics. So we take that, whatever they've reported, right, to the federal government as the cut line. But if it's not listed at all in there, then it might be that if it's a newer school, or it's a school that may be separated from another school, or is designated another way. So we'd have to find that out, Bonnie.
Okay, thank you.
Angela?
Yes.
Okay, I had a question. I had one of our graduates applied and was accepted to a master's program. She wants to know if she can defer her payment status until she completes her degree.
So the question is, did she just graduate?
Yes, she in May.
So that's a case of where that deferral is allowable. So
Okay,
I can pull up, let me go back and see if I can't pull up the regs so you guys can see exactly what they say here.
Did you want to share your screen, Angela?
Yeah, I'm just going to the CFR first.
Okay.
And I don't know about you guys, but I've always got to enlarge this stuff. Y'all can tell me if you see that. Can everyone see that? So 263.10, what are the requirements for payback deferral? So education deferral. If a participant completes or exits the PD program but plans to continue his or her education as a full-time student without interruption. So again, Cheryl, to your point, they just graduated in May. They want to go right into a full-time program,
Yes.
here's what they need to do. It says submitted to the secretary. They can submit it to me, or they can submit it to, to via email to the DCS. And
Okay.
to have this information, right? The name of the accredited institution, a copy of the letter of admission, the degree being sought, and the projected date of completion. And so we would approve it on the basis that they're continuing as a full-time student. They would similar to like when they're doing payback, right? Of sort of every 6 months, kind of restating or just noting that they are still enrolled. That's what they would be asked to do in that case.
Okay, all right. I'll give her this information so she can send it to you guys.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure. And I just put the link to those regs right in there for you all to grab as needed. Okay, did I see any other questions? Okay.
Didn't see any new ones in there. I think we've been getting them all.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over. Sarah, did you have a couple of things you wanted to share in terms of what's coming?
Yeah, so we're going to share about a couple of events that we have coming up. One being the True Colors. So for those who are able to join us in June, you heard about this, but I know a lot of you were out of office, hopefully enjoying some downtime. So we do have a workshop coming up on August 4th from 2 to 5 Eastern. It is a little different than some of our other workshops. Instead of just everybody being able to attend that's interested, because of the nature of this workshop being so interactive, we actually have to cap how many can attend. So registration is on a first come, first served basis. So we'll pop that registration link over into the chat box for you. This is a workshop that is really designed to help you understand more about your communication style, your work style, and then also better understand the communication and work styles of those around you and on your team, and how you can better work together and better communicate. It's really a fun workshop. The OIE team actually did it last week as a group. So if you're interested, I encourage you to go ahead and register as soon as possible, because once we've hit our maximum, we will have to close that particular workshop. The other part that we were going to give you a little heads up on this week is that we did release a new grant competition, the ARP Air grant competition. So the NIA was released on the 13th. There's a link there that you can access, as well as just going directly to the OIE website. The notice of intent to apply is due on the 23rd, and we'll start the pre-application webinars on the 28th and August 3rd, with proposals being due September 13th. So if that's something that you're interested in exploring, I encourage you to head over to the OIE website to learn more about that new grant competition. And then the last thing we have on our docket of the day are 2 events coming up that are open to everyone. So we have office hours. That's our standard once a month, where you can come and go as you please within that hour, asking any questions you might have. We have the program officers on, we have the TA team on. So it's a great time to pop in if you have additional questions. That's from 1 to 2 on July 29th. And I know Angela will be out of office on the 29th, but you'll still have the TA team on. So if there's anything that we can't answer for you, we can collect it, save it for her return, and get you an answer then. And then our next PD program talking circle is going to be Friday, August 20th at our same time from 3 to 4 Eastern. So we look forward to seeing you, if nothing else in between, definitely on August 20th. So as we're wrapping up here, I will pop up our wrap-up poll, our standard wrap-up poll here. Because I know some of you have spent a good deal of time with us this afternoon and may have to hop to some other activities. But if you don't mind completing that before you head out, and then you've got the contact info here, both for Angela as well as for the TA team, and probably most pertinent to the content we've been covering today, the information for the PDP DCS help desk. And that's particularly helpful, you know, for any of your participants. I am going to pop over in the chat box again, also the direct link to the recording. I know some of you came into the event today a little bit late, and that way you have the direct link to be able to see that recording. So I'll pop that over there momentarily. There we go. That way you can watch that at your leisure.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Melanie. Thank you, Tracy. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us and for your great questions today. I know you'll continue to have them as we work through this. And I just ask that you continue to convey these, the information to your participants who I know need this, and we want to get it to them so that they can get the credit that they deserve, and that they've certainly earned. With that, I'll just say I will be on vacation for the latter half of July. So just know that, as Sarah said, if you make the office hours or send me an email, no, I'll be able to circle back by early August in case I miss those. And thank you, everybody. I'll give you 5 minutes back. Enjoy your weekend. Take care.